welcome to Unit 4. Hopefully you have read Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 5 through chapter 6, verse 30, along with your textbook reading that corresponds with those verses, and you're ready to watch this video and then take your reading quiz. A couple of things I just want to point out about this week's reading. Chapter 4 mostly is a depiction of the siege, the conquest, and all the horror that's going to take place with the invasion of the enemy, the destruction that God's going to bring because they've broken covenant. Again, remember, this would be early in Jeremiah's ministry, so long before any idea of this is really in their minds, or the possibility of this is even in their minds. But he's describing just the horror of this event, and he talks about this enemy from the north. And who is this? As the book goes on, we're going to realize that it's specifically Babylon. But at this point, early in his ministry, maybe it's not exactly clear. He's just talking about this vague enemy from the north. And you're going to have a whole unit where you study who this possibly could be. So I won't delve into that too much. But I want us to notice a particular verse here, chapter 4, let's start in verse 22. He says, "My people are fools. They do not know me. They are senseless children. They have no understanding. They are skilled in doing evil. They do not know how to do good. I looked at the earth, and it was formless and empty, and at the heavens, and their light was gone. I looked at the mountains, and they were quaking. All the hills were swaying. I looked, and there were no people. Every bird in the sky had flown away. I looked, and the fruitful land was a desert. All of its towns lay in ruin before the Lord, before his fierce anger." This phrase here in verse 23, when he says, "I looked at the earth and it was formless and empty," in the Hebrew is tohu vavohu. So if you've had any Hebrew, you probably recognize that phrase. It occurs in Genesis 1:1, when in the beginning God made the heavens and the earth. Well, actually it's Genesis 1:2, isn't it? It's in the second verse when he says, "Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness hovered over the surface of the deep." So the idea of in creation that it was formless and empty, and then God brought order. He brought form, and he filled the form. Jeremiah is using the opposite here in chapter 4. He's saying, "I looked, and the earth was formless and empty." We've gone back to chaos, is what Jeremiah is saying. He's speaking of an undoing. The world is returning to chaos. What God brought into order, we're returning back to chaos. So it's interesting because that's the only other place that phrase is used in the Bible. So Genesis 1:2, and then right here. So he's trying to just help his reader really feel the destruction and the horror of the conquest. In chapter 5, he's still talking about this kind of chaotic world that's coming, but he's mostly focusing on the moral decay of the people, along with the complacency of the leaders. And he uses something similar that we see with Lot during the Abraham narratives with Sodom and Gomorrah. He says in chapter 5, "Go up and down the streets of Jerusalem, look and consider, search through her squares. If you can find but one person who deals honestly and seeks the truth, I will forgive this city." So it sounds like the deal God made with Abraham. So the rest of that chapter just kind of deals with the conquest of the city, which is still greatly in the future at this point. He says a statement in chapter 6, starting verse 13, "From the least to the greatest, all are greedy for gain. Prophets and priests alike practice deceit. They dress the wounds of my people as though they're not serious. Peace, peace, when there is no peace." So the religious leaders are acting like everything's fine, and they're not really dealing with the issues. And Jeremiah has much to say about that. They're ignoring the watchmen on the wall. They have issues, but the religious leaders are not being faithful to deal with those issues and bring truth to the people. And like it said earlier, the people are senseless. They don't know God. God has a lot to say in these chapters about greed and social oppression. Jeremiah lived among a people of lies, and they seemed to delight in deceit, from the least to the greatest. So the priest, the religious leaders, and the people seem to delight in lies and deceit. It's a lot like our culture today. But God is still not pleased, especially with religious leaders who have these characteristics or tolerate these characteristics. God still cares about social issues and justice and caring for the poor and making sure that the people are being treated honestly and that greed has not gripped our hearts. So this is not just for the Old Testament. James tells us that religion that's valid, that's worthy, will also look after the widow and the orphan, and that we would be concerned about these social issues. So I hope that God pricks your heart as you read this text this week, as He's done mine, and that you guys have a great week.